there is actually a very difficult piece in this Gemara, Tet Mid Aleph.
Yes.
Towards the bottom of the Amud, and I looked at it a number of times. It's very difficult to understand. It tries to make an analogy with Nazir. Actually, Nazir becomes Tomei twice, and you'll see it.
Okay, yeah.
And that's followed by another difficult piece, which talks about a Zav who becomes a Zav 3 times over different days. So actually, I brought with me my little bag of Mr. Smart Scroll when we get there, because I tried a number of times. I still don't know if I have it. Okay, so at any rate, there are 2 parts to the Mishnah. The first half of the Mishnah on Tet Manal says, Mishal Chag V'Yom Tov Rishon Shachag Chogeget Kol HaRegel Chogeget Kol HaRegel. If a person did not bring the Korban Chagiga on the first day, they should bring it the first day, but if they didn't, they can bring the entire Yontiv as a makeup. V'Yom Tov Achron Shel Chag, including even the last day of Sukkot, which is Shmini Atzeres, which is, you could argue, that's no longer really Yontif. That's a different Yontif, but it's still considered a continuation for this purpose. And of our Regel V'Lochag, if the Yontif passed and you didn't bring the Korban Chagiga, Einochad B'Chuyuto, you can't make it up. Right? You're not obligated, which means you lost out. And Al Zeh Nemar Muvat Lo Yichal Litzkon. It's a pasuk in Koheles, that which is crooked cannot be made straight. V'chesron Lo Yichal Limonos. And that which is missing can't be counted, can't be included.
Right.
In other words, it's gone. You snooze, you lose. Basically, that's what Koheles is saying. And having said that, the Gemara then gives different alternative interpretations what the pasuk in Koheles means. Muvas lo yichal liskon v'chesron lo yichal limonos. Rav Shimon Nasi Omer Ezel muvas she'en yichal liskon. What is something that's crooked that can't be righted, can't be fixed? Zeh ba'al ha'erva v'holid mimenu mamzer. A person has relations with incestuous relationships and gives birth from this union of mamzer. That's a mamzer stuck, and the status of mamzer cannot be reversed. Right? And the Mishnah says, "Vim tomar begone v'gozel." You steal and you kind of steal, or you steal brazenly. That's not lo yichal liskom, because yachavu lachziro.
Sure.
You can return it. Okay, so you can't really ever make it up. There's trauma and there's all kinds of other implications, but at least you can return that which you took via scum. But on the other hand, a mamzer is stuck forever. Real mamzer, correct? Rav Shimon ben Yochai Omer ein korem uvas. You don't say, Rav Shimon ben Yochai says, when you say something is crooked, you don't, and that must be a lamisha hayim etukam batchilav in the davet. It must have been straight and became crooked. You can't say something is crooked that is created crooked. If the natural created piece is created crooked, that's the straightness. That's the natural item. So crooked. No, you should not. No, Koheles would not call it crooked.
Because if that's natural,
you have to be something that. To be crooked means you have had to been straight.
Gotcha.
Right? When you see a tree that's crooked, but that's how the tree is shaped. Right? For the tree itself, that's normal. That's natural. You're crooked because you're straight. So crooked, in other words, ma'uvas. In fact, it's not even really crooked. Ma'uvas means like it's ruined. It's misguided. It's like the same thing as avon. So you must have been initially straight. Batchilav and etavet must have been something that was initially straight and became twisted or crooked. What is referred to as a Talmud Chacham of Parish Torah. First to a scholar who was a scholar who knew better and nonetheless turned away from the Torah. Okay? So the other items can't refer to that because there's nothing. A mamzer was always created as a mamzer. You can't say the mamzer is crooked. That's the mamzer's creativity. Where am I? I'm sorry, 10
What?
9A.
Oh, you missed a few weeks.
Yes, you did. 1 week you came that I wasn't here, and 1 week I came that you weren't here.
That's right.
I was in New York. Sorry, 9A.
9A.
Okay, sorry.
So the good news for you, it's in the Mishnah.
Okay.
The even better news is for today's year, you really need to know the first half. The second one, Muvas V'Yichaliskan, will be the second part. The basic premise of this Mishnah is that if you should bring a Korban Chagiga on the first day. If you didn't bring it on the first day, you can bring it other days. If you didn't bring it all the days of Sukkot, you can still bring it as well on Shmini Atzeres.
Right.
That is a chiddush, that to say that you can even bring it on Shmini Atzeres.
Right.
So the Gemara is going to spend a lot of time trying to understand what that is based upon. Okay, and then the topic, and then we hit the rough waters. Okay, so Minani Mili, I've actually been terrified of doing this piece of Gemara, I have to tell you.
Okay, let's go sleep and we'll bother you.
Yeah.
No, you can bother me.
One has to tough
We'll do our
No, I
best.
was actually thinking of skipping it. Well,
We
Minani
can
Mili,
only do our best.
That's when you break
it's
fast.
going to come in today and say we're on
It's
Daf
like
Yud.
classic.
You would never know.
Parts of the Tanakh you skip for the kids.
When I was a
right?
kid, yeah, when I was a kid. It's not important.
It's true.
Off the Gemara, we would skip certain Gemaras.
Yes, Minani Mili. Okay, so Minani Mili, how do you know this? So that something that the day of Shmini Atzeres is still a day to make up for the karbanos of Sukkot.
Right.
Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shmuel Nemar Atzeret B'Shvi Shel Pesach V'Nemar Atzeret B'Shmini Shel Chag. Okay, so in other words, the last day of the Yontiv of Pesach is called Atzeret. Right? We use the term Atzeret to refer to Shmini Atzeret, right? Okay, and we also use the term Atzeret in rabbinic literature, not in the Torah, to refer to the Yontif of Shavuot. Okay.
Right.
But in the Torah, it's not called Atzeret, it's called Yom HaBikurim and so forth. So, but the term where Atzeret comes up is on Shvi Shel Pesach, and actually also comes up on Shvi Shel Pesach and Shmini Shel Sukkot. We call it Shmini Atzeret. We call it Shmini Atzeres.
Yeah.
Right? So the analogy is, says the Gemara, Ma lahalam l'tashlumim, avkam l'tashlumim. The same way that the 7th day of Pesach is a makeup for what you should have bought on the first day,
Right.
so too the last day, on the 8th day of Sukkot, what we call Shmini Atzeres, a makeup.
Use the word Atzeret both times.
Right, correct.
So it's,
Now, by the way, the term Atzeret, what does Atzeret really mean?
get together.
Atzeret.
Like an assembly, no?
No.
You mean assembly?
No.
Latzor?
Latzar means to stop.
What?
Stop.
Stop, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It really does.
Like a stop sign, isn't
All
it?
stop signs are Atzar.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
Atzar.
Atzar, hagvul fanecho, or a regular
Yeah.
stop sign.
Yeah.
The answer is, what it means is you're going to stop doing that which you normally do during the week. That's what Atzeret actually means.
But it only seems to apply to the last day of the Chag. not
Now,
the first.
it only applies, if you look at where it's referred to, it's only applied to holidays that don't have specific mitzvot associated with it. So, for example, in Pesach, the first day of Pesach has a special mitzvah of eating matzah. There's no mitzvah to eat matzah the rest of Pesach. You can't eat chametz.
Right.
Yeah, that's Rashud. Says Rashud. So the Gemara uses as another drush. One says once, one says 6, one says 7. So right. Okay, but practically speaking, there's a special mitzvah associated with it. There's a mitzvah Sipri Yitziat Mitzrayim. Vigat Levincha Bayamuhu Lemor. Bavor Zeh Asu Hashem Libesesi Mitzrayim. So there are special unique mitzvot on the holiday of Sukkot. Okay, there are also special mitzvahs associated. The first day for sure has a mitzvah of Lulav and Etrog. We take Lulav and Etrog, by the way, the entire holiday of Sukkot. Really, in the days of the temple, they only took the Lulav and Etrog all the days of Sukkot in the temple. Outside of the temple, they only took it on the first day. Can you imagine that? You invest all that money, and you only get one shot. Right? It wasn't even a Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golia because they lived in Jerusalem. We lived outside Jerusalem in Israel.
You get married, you have a wedding, and it's also one shot.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bigger one shot.
I think we better turn off the tape now, okay? So the answer is you have 7 days of Mishnah actually for a wedding, right? But you're right, the wedding is okay.
Wedding's the wedding.
Yeah, that's true. So the answer is but it's more than not Sarah there. That requires actually actively involved. So at any rate, the last day of Pesach is nothing very special. It's a holiday.
Yeah.
It's an Atzeret. You don't do work. But you don't do something special like have a Seder. You don't do something special like you have to eat matzah.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing on Shmini Atzeret is the best example. There's no special mitzvah.
No.
Right? And that's probably why Shavuot actually has a special mitzvah, Shtei Lechem, which is brought in the temple. So that's why the Torah doesn't talk about it. We tend to use Atzeret because we don't have a base of Mikdash, so Shavuot we call sometimes Chag Atzeret as well, because there's no special thing. But all I'm saying is, if you look at the simple meaning of Atzeret, it's more of a negation of not to do something. Don't hold back, right? Just don't do work on the 7th day or 8th day, 7th day of Pesach and the 8th day of Sukkot. As a result, that's the reason why it's called it. The fact that it used the same thing for Pesach and Shmini Atzeret Atzeret gives rise to this Hekesh or Gzera Shava, to say that the same way that the end of Pesach you can make up for the first day of Pesach, so to the end of Sukkot or Shmini Atzeret you can make up for the first day of Sukkot. Avkan Tashlomim. Then the Gemara says this is called Mufna. Well, the Gzera Shava, Gzera Shava has to be as follows: that when you make a comparison between two different topics, you're comparing the same word, right? In this case, it's Atzeret. In both cases, either in one case or in both cases, the word can't be used for anything else. You can't have multiple drushot off the same word, right? I mean, different people can have different drushot on the same word.
We never do that. We never have two drushot.
We never do. Sometimes the Gemara will mention different approaches and different people on the word, but the same person can darshan two halachic concepts. You can have all kinds of drushas, right? But the reality is you can't really darshan two halachos by a gzera shava one to another. Okay, now. There's a subset, and that is that in one case, one pasuk is used for something else, right? You're comparing two places. So is the word free in both places, or is the word free only in one place? Let's take this. I mean, there's no drush. I've atzeret here and atzeret here. So there are two possibilities. One is that the word atzeret teaches me nothing, and the word atzeret here teaches me nothing. So the fact that atzeret and atzeret bring them together. There could be another a situation where in one case the word atzeret teaches me something, but in the second case it doesn't. So the Gemara says, well, the fact the second case it used atzeret tells me it's the same thing as the first case. Okay, so when it's open on both sides, it's called mufna. Mufna means open. I guess I don't know. Mufna. Okay. Panui. Right. Free. It's free.
Yeah. Panui is the root. It's a part of
He's saying it's from
I don't know. I'm not sure what's from. Okay?
I don't know.
But mufna means it's free. Okay. Now, so the Gemara says mufna, right? And the problem is that if it's not mufna, and it's one of the cases being used for something, then it's very easy to knock off this analogy. You can come up with what's called a pircha to say you can't make the comparison because, you know what, first of all, they're not both free, only one is free, and they're not really analogous. So if it's mufna mishneit stadim, if it's open from both ends, then you're good. If it's only open from one end, then it's very easy to find a way to separate between the two. So the Gemara says as follows: you must say that the analogy between Shvi Shel Pesach and Shmini Shel Chag Shel Sukkot has to be a case where Atzeret is an open word. Because if it was used in one place, you could break the analogy apart, because in one case, this Shvi Shel Pesach is the same day as the same holiday as the first 6 days, whereas the 8th day of Pesach, the 8th day of Sukkot, is a different holiday. So you're trying to make an analogy, but they're not analogous. You're saying the same way the 7th day I can make up for the first day, the 8th day of Sukkot I can make up for. But you could say that the analogy is inappropriate. That kind of knockoff can work. It's a minimal kind of knockoff, but it works if it's not really an open word. If the word is being used for something else. It's called not mufna. Mufna only means not echad.
So what's the word used in this case?
So the answer is, the Gemara says it must be the word is not used for anything.
It's not used for anything?
Not used for anything else. There's no other drash for it. Right?
In either case.
In either case.
What's it with Pesach?
What's with Pesach? Nothing with Pesach.
What's Atzeres with Pesach?
The 7th day of Pesach is called B'yom HaShmini Atzeres.
What about it?
There's nothing. It means
but it's an atzeret.
It's called atzeret.
It should really be 6 days. They had to be 7
No,
days.
the 7th day is called atzeret. Atzeret means you do nothing.
So
you don't work.
Same as the first day. You do nothing.
No, first day you actually do something. You have a seder, you eat matzah.
Okay, so
right? Atzeret means there's nothing to do. It's called atzeret. Atzeret is like saying day off, stat holiday. What do you do on a stat holiday? You can't do anything. The stores are closed. The liquor store is closed. Even worse. You sleep in bed.
No.
Right? Now you know, okay?
The liquor store, I know. I can feel for that.
I'm saying, but when you talk about a holiday when we talk about a stat holiday means there's nothing that you can do. Everything's closed. So how do you celebrate it? So you celebrate with family and this and that, but there's nothing that you can actively do. Can't go to the mall. Malls are closed except the few that are open. So at any rate, the Gemara simply makes a statement. Therefore, it's a very unusual type of approach.
The beginning just says mufna, right?
You must say that it is the words are open.
Right.
The lav mufna, because if the words are not open, and one of them are being used for something else, ikal mifra, you could ask the question that they're not analogous. Malishvisha Pesach shekain eno cholak mishalafanav. The same way, the 7th day of Pesach is not different than the day before it.
Right.
Tomar b'shmini shachak shecholak milafanav.
Right.
Okay, so but the 8th day of Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, is definitely different.
Clearly.
There are a number of differences between that and the day before it. Right?
Totally.
We go into the Sukkot on Shmini Atzeres. We, as many of us, right? We go into Sukkot on Shmini Atzeres.
Yeah.
Why? Because for us it's Yom Tov Sheni of Hoshana Rabbah, of the 7th day of Sukkot, Hoshana Rabbah. Right, and we go into the diaspora. We say because it's actually gets a little shaky. Maybe you don't go into
Make a
Sukkot.
bracha.
I do.
Make a bracha?
Hoshana Rabbah is the 7th day of Sukkot. We go in on Shmini Atzeres to Sukkot.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. It takes a while for the brain.
Great. And now we don't take a lulav and esrog. We don't take a lulav and esrog, right? We don't take a lulav and esrog. We say it's muksa, right? The answer is because if we were to take it on Shmini Atzeres, because it's only rabbinic, it's like a baltos if we're adding an additional day. Now, why is it not adding an additional day with Sukkot by going into the Sukkah? And the answer is because anybody could go into a gazebo. Anybody could sit outside and relax.
Well, you're not allowed to use it to relax or something.
Well, but the fact that you go out and sit there, yeah.
It's limited.
Use,
No, you can't do it on the 8th day or the 9th or whatever it is.
you can go in there the whole year.
No,
In other words, it's not that noticeable. So for our Sukkot, which are pop-up Sukkot, they're cloth Sukkot, they're a prefab Sukkot, it's clear it's not the same type of thing as building a gazebo in your backyard.
In the middle of winter.
And our climate is actually much different. That's, by the way, that's the head that the Hasidim use why they don't go into a sukkah on Shmini Atzeres.
Right.
Because they say no one goes into this kind of contraption
In this type of weather.
In this kind of weather,
Yeah.
right? Wait for next year. Next year's Sukkot is the end of October. Wait, guys, okay? Wait.
Third week in October.
Right. Shmini Atzeres.
Oh, it's got the winter.
Hoshana Rabbah is like the 4th week in
You know, my son has a heater too. Gorgeous. Take care, bro.
I have a heater, but I have a coat.
Yeah, no, for sure.
very late, okay? Yes.
We've been knowing to have the dessert back in that.
Yeah, I know.
All I'm trying to say is, therefore, the Gemara says it must be the word Atzeret is open, because if it were not open, you could actually differentiate between the two of them and say, yeah, Atzeret, but you don't run around the world saying, apples. You don't run around the world saying S, ace, right, from the Torah. So it's got to be some kind of comparison or applicability or similarity.
But here they're saying it's
here,
not,
there. So the fact that so therefore to make this kind of analogy and use it, it has to be what's called mufna.
Right.
So the Gemara makes that premise. The Gemara says, right, lie afnuye mufna. It for sure. Lie means it's like wow. It really is mufna. Why? Michdei my atzeret. What does atzeret mean? Atzar b'asiyat malacha. Hold back. Stop from not doing malacha. What does the word atzeret mean? It means don't to do. Stop. Stop from what? Not stop from going to the mall. Stop from doing work. There's nothing else to do positive, I pointed out on the last day of Pesach. There's nothing else special mitzvah for Shmini Atzeres. What does Atzeret mean? Atzeret means don't do malacha. Stop. Don't do malacha that you do normally. And Haksiv, and it says, Lo ta'aseh malacha. It already says, in terms of dealing with Shmini Atzeres, I think you shouldn't do malacha. So if it says lo sasem malacha, atzeret the kasav achmana lamali. Why do I need the word atzeret not to do malacha? It already says don't do malacha. El shmamina liafnuye. Okay, so it must be that it's really open, and you can use to compare the two atzerets together.
How come they always give the thing there? It's like a party, and God doesn't want to go home. And what isn't it like adding rather than?
It's the same thing. Not doing malacha means you're celebrating with God.
Well,
yeah, great. Homiletically, it's our festival with God. We have one special korban with nuts.
Doesn't that mean adding to the simcha or adding to the day? Certainly over 7 days.
Yeah, but That's true. That's all homily and it's all drash and it's all about spirituality. But the reality is, in terms of special mitzvah, there isn't special mitzvah. What do? We take a Sefer Torah.
Yeah, no.
We have Simchas Torah we associate with it, correct?
I mean, the real problem is, of course, like you say, there's such an obvious change from the Korbanos, which are going down day by day from 13. So it's clearly a separate holiday, but...
Correct. Right. It's defined as a separate holiday.
Yeah, well, it is.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
So if I understood this, they're saying just before, look, one of the problems is you might argue it's a separate holiday, and therefore it's not mufneh. But because it has both Lo Taseh and Atzeret, that proves that it is
mufneh.
That it is.
Right, because it says Lo Taseh Melacha
and the word
Atzeret. Atzeret wasn't needed, so therefore it's mufneh.
Gotcha.
So at any rate, the first approach is, how do you know, therefore, to compare, to say that even on the 8th day of Sukkot, or Shmini Atzeres, you can make up, if you didn't bring the Korban Chagiga on the first day, from Atzeret.
Perfect.
Okay? Who says this? Rabbi Yochanan and name Rabbi Shmuel. Okay? Now the Gemara says there's another approach. V'tana is a brisa that has a different pasuk we learn from. Ma'aseh Lamehach, he learns it from here. The Tanya, v'chagosem oso chag l'Hashem shivas yomim. You're going to celebrate. This is about Sukkot, 7 days. Yachol, and it's a very complicated drash. Yachol yichei chogeg v'hol kol shiva. You could think that you should initially can bring the Korban Chagiga all 7 days, because it says Chagosem oso chag l'Hashem shivas yomim. You're going to celebrate it for 7 days. So maybe I can bring a Korban Chagiga either every day or any of the days. L'chadchila Talmud lomer oso v'chagosem oso it oso ato chogeg v'yato chogeg kol shiva. The fact says v'chagosem oto it refers to the first day, even though it says 7 days. But it could say v'chagosem chag l'Hashem shivat yomim. V'chagosem oto means it refers not it the Karban, but it the first day itself. So l'chadchili
the Karban on the first day.
Right, correct. Celebrate on it.
Right.
For 7 days. That's a contradiction. He's celebrating on it. We're celebrating for 7 days. So therefore, you should bring the Karban on the first day.
Absolutely.
Right? So why does it say celebrate on it for 7 days? L'tashlomin. So the 7 days are to make up if I didn't bring on the first day. I should really bring on the first day. But if I didn't bring on the first day, I've got 7 days to make it up. Now, where does Shmini Atzeres come in? Uminayin she'im lo chag yom tov rishon shechag shechogeg v'holech et kol haregel v'yom tov ha'acharon. How do you know if I didn't make it on the first day, I can do the entire yom tov and including Shmini Atzeres? It says Talmud lomar b'chodesh hashvi tachol goso. It says on the seventh month. So which means it's something beyond just the 7 days of Sukkot. It includes something from the rest of the month. How much? Now, if the rest of the month, the 7th month, maybe I can bring the Karban.
Anytime.
The entire month. Maybe I could bring the entire month. Talmud loma oto. So it goes back and use the term oto again. It's oto tochogeg v'iyat tochogeg chutzalo. You can celebrate on it. And you can't celebrate beyond the festival itself. So also is somehow used here twice. Once to tell me that the Chagil the first day, and second of all to say that no matter what I include, it limits it to something that relates to the holiday. It's not a very clear drash. Because they managed to take 1 day and make it into 7, 1 day and make it into 8, but they put the lid on it to say it's got to be initially brought on the first day, and you can't bring it beyond the 8th day, you can't bring it the rest of the month. Okay, so that's the second drash in terms of how I would know, very unclear, how I would know to learn that I can bring the Korban Chagiga even as late as Shmini Atzeres if I didn't bring it on the first day, b'di'evad.
Right.
And this is called Tashlumin. Right, Tashlumin means make-up. Payment.
Until the 8th day.
Right. Now, so far so good?
Absolutely.
All right. So whichever drash we learned, the Gemara has a basic premise here that I'm supposed to bring the Korban on the first day. If I didn't bring the first day, any day of Yom Tov, including Shmini Atzeres.
Right.
And what do I bring it as? Tashlum and makeup. Right?
Right, because ideally, I should bring it on the first
ideally,
day,
it's not the day to bring it,
right.
But I have an opportunity to make up what I didn't bring. So the Gemara used this term Tashlumin.
Right.
Now, what am I making up? So here's what the Gemara is going to enter into.
Tashlum means makeup. The word tashlum.
Tashlum means to pay back.
We use to pay back.
Lashlim is to make complete. Right, lashlim is to make complete. Lashalem is to pay. Right, so I'm making up what I have to pay.
Okay.
Shalem is complete. So tashlum is a fairly common word.
Okay, I just don't know what it is. That's what I'm asking.
So the question is, what am I making up? You say, well, what are you making up? You're making up what you didn't bring. Right. So there are two approaches. Okay, it's like this, and it's just a little complicated. If I didn't bring it the first day, so I can make it up any time, and I bring it the 8th day. I'm making up for them not bringing it on the first day. Right? That's how we normally understand it. Right. You could also argue differently.
Didn't bring it on any of the other
days. Right. If I didn't bring it the first day, I should have brought the second day. If I didn't bring it the second day, the makeup for the second day is the third day. If I didn't bring it the third day, I should make it up on the 4th day. Right. And then if I didn't bring it on the 7th day, my makeup was on the 8th day for making up for the 7th day, which should have made it for the 6th, which should have made it for the 5th, which should have made it for the 4th. Right? In other words, I'm bringing on the 8th day to make up for a previous time that I should have brought it.
Right.
So that's the Gemara tries to entertain this discussion. Now, what's going to be the difference between the two? For us, it would look like to be very little difference between the two.
You're saying it's like a cumulative thing, not a cumulative thing. Like you should. It's like you should have brought it the very next day. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, but you see that in
like
sometime in law though, where it says, let's say there's a fine for this, or they say, well, really we're going to include like 8 times you didn't do it or something. You know what I'm saying?
No, there's two options. One option is you have to do it the very next day.
Yes.
And then if you don't, the other option is you do it within the holiday.
Let's assume you wanted to call it Avera. If you're supposed to do it the second day and you didn't, and you brought it the third day, so how many Averas did you do? 1 for not bringing the first day?
Oh, I see. But you could, like a bris. Well, if you don't do it on the 8th day, you do it some other time. Like within you don't have to. You do it on the week, 2 weeks later.
No, once you miss it.
Yes, I'm just saying, once you miss the first day, that's the law. Why?
Well, you do it at the earliest possible.
But you consider safe.
But you
can't arbitrarily skip a week and just do it.
No, if the baby's sick and you can't do it on the 8th day.
No, it's not
right, so you don't necessarily have to do it on the 9th day. Once it's past the 8th day, you can do it 2-3 days later. You wait for family or something. Yeah, that's a general.
Yes, there's sometimes people will wait.
Not like
more importantly, it doesn't override Shabbos.
Yeah, right.
For example, right.
That's a perfect example. Shabbos is overridden for a bris on the 8th day. Yeah. But if for whatever reason it is, it's not the 8th day. It never overrides Shabbos.
Right. Like
if it's a fast day, you skip to the
no fast is not a reason to skip
the
a bris.
No, I'm saying if the 9th day happens to be a fast day, you go on the 10th.
Maybe.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is there's two options. One is each day counts, and the other one as long as you do it within Yom Tov, it's okay. It's not a kind thing, but
we have a concept not to delay a mitzvah. So you have a chance to do
Correct.
Just because part of Yom Tov, you can't delay it to the last day.
Yeah. No,
it's like he's saying, it's like another variable.
Like I said, are you beginning in a variable each day?
Right. Or let's rephrase it. If I didn't bring the first day, does the day now become the second day? And if I didn't bring the second day, does the day now become the third day? Is now the day? In other words, what is the status of the makeup day? That takes me all the way down to the 8th day being a makeup for the days before it. Is it the first day was the day and that's it? It's gone, like a bris milah?
Right.
And any other day is a bris shelo bismano?
Right.
Or do I say if I didn't bring it the first day, so the Almighty gives me a second chance,
like
the Gemara will refer to in Amud Bet about Pesach Sheni. I couldn't bring the Pesach Sheni on Pesach on the first Pesach, so I have an opportunity. That's actually a machlokas. That's the Gemara is going to talk about that. But let's just give the analogy so we can understand it. So in other words, now I couldn't bring it on the first day because I was Tamei on the first Pesach. So a month later I can bring it, and that's like I brought a Korban Pesach, or is it making up for the Korban Pesach I couldn't do? You see?
You say you didn't have a choice because you were tummy.
But I missed it. Whatever. I was tummy.
What's the status of this?
Right? Okay. Yeah. So in other words, the real question is, the day that I bring it, right? Is it now the new day? Does the day now become transferred to the next day?
It's as if I'm doing it on the first day.
Right. Or it's like It's like A1, A2, A3, A4, or is it A, B, C, D, E, F, G?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the question. That's the discussion the Gemara has. What's going to be the difference between these two approaches? So the difference will be very clear. Which is right and which is wrong is going to be less clear. The difference will be, what if I couldn't bring it on the first day?
Right.
What if, let's say a person was lame? We had learned that a chiger who can't walk on his own can't bring the korban chagiga.
Right.
This person was lame on the first day, and he was cured. Okay, that's not unreasonable. That's not unreasonable.
Whatever,
He got better. He was surgery.
Well, before circumstance beyond your
Correct. Right. Some of the achronim say, what about a per kid who's bar mitzvah? That's a very complicated thing. It's very different, right?
What does he do?
What bar mitzvah? What?
He gets bar mitzvah in the middle Sukkot. That could be. The word does not talk about it, but they say that could be another example. Because like he becomes, his first day could be the third day of Sukkot.
He's missed it. Over his money, batul chabanah.
Well, maybe.
I don't know.
Okay, it's a famous Minchas Chinuch discussion about Sfiras Omer. Child turns bar mitzvah in the middle of Sfiras Omer. Right? Because you need to count 49 days without missing one. But the reality is, when he was counting it, he was not bar mitzvah. So well, the answer is halachically yes. You do consider count. You do continue counting.
Yeah, but
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, because you counted the first days, but
Because you counted, even though he's not bar mitzvah, but he counted. He counted. So now you're counting.
Here you wouldn't mechayiv to bring it on the first day.
He's not chayav to count
Not chayav
either.
to count either, he's saying.
Right. But
But he count.
he's not chayav to count. He's not chayav to count.
Doing things he doesn't have to do.
Right.
Okay.
But what is he really counting if it goes past Shavuos? What's he counting?
He doesn't go past Shavuos.
No.
He turns bar mitzvah on the 10th day of Sfiras Omer.
Yeah.
So the first 9 days he was a cut, and he's not obligated to do anything.
So you got to keep counting.
He continues. He counts like everybody else.
No, but what was it? Is it 49 days he counts?
He counts he counts like everybody else
I
counts.
see what you mean. No, he just counts up to Shavuos, but it's considered.
He doesn't start from his bar mitzvah. He counts from actually Pesach,
right.
like everybody else does. But the first part of his counting, he's not bar mitzvah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So his status changes. So in other words, so the Gemara is going to say the difference between these two approaches: the person who's lame, who became cured on the second day, third day, fourth day, whatever it is. So therefore, is this now considered? What is his status, or better stated, if he was pater, he was lame on the first day and he couldn't bring the korban. Is there ever a makeup for this? If you say all the days are makeup for the first day he was not a bar chiyuva.
Right.
So there's nothing to make up. Right? He was not included. He was lame. He was excluded. He was out of he was done. He was out.
Right.
But if you say that every day, if you can't bring the first day, the second day becomes the day. The second can't bring the second, the third day becomes the day. Then if he becomes unlame, he becomes healthy and can walk on the fourth day. Then he brings the korban. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the analogy. Now, to kind of, and once we get that, that's when we get into this really rocky part, because it starts making an analogy about different scenarios where people are not yet really part of the story, right? They're not yet really chaya, but you see that somehow they're still obligated to bring a korban. And one case is going to be about Nazir, or a double Nazir, and one case is going to be about the Zav. Right, correct. Okay, all right.
All right.
Now, okay, so here we go. So my tashlumin, what's the makeup? Rabbi Yochanan amar tashlumin l'rishon, Rabbi Hoshaya amar tashlumin zel lazel. Okay, so the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Hoshaya. Rabbi Yochanan says you're making up for the first day, and Rabbi Hoshaya says day after day to day to day. My benayu Rabbi Zera chiga b'yom rishon v'nid pashet b'yom hasheni ika benayu. Okay. A person who's lame on the first day became walking on the second day. That's the difference. Rabbi Yochanan amar tashlumin l'rishon, kevin lo chaze barishon lo chaze b'sheni. Rabbi Yochanan that it's a makeup all for the first day. If this lame person was lame on the first day, even though he was cured on the second, he's pater. He can't bring a korban. Rabbi Hoshaya amar tashlumin zel lazeh afagav lo chaze barishon chaze b'sheni. Even though he couldn't bring it on the first day, he can bring it on the second day, and so forth and so on. Okay, now.
So Rabbi Yochanan is saying two things. A, he doesn't have to bring it. B, he can't bring it. Am I right about
Correct,
that?
he can't bring it. He can't.
Can't?
Once you're out. Cannot.
Not.
Rabbi Yochanan says
He
cannot,
didn't have
because
any
if he didn't have an
obligation
obligation.
to
Right, okay?
Gotcha.
All right. So, now, I actually Xeroxed some of the art scroll. Okay? Not such a good Xerox, but it'll be okay. Okay, I'll tell you. Here we go. This might help us, this might not help us. There you go.
Take a gravel.
That's what? Sorry?
I gotta take a gravel when I read this.
Gravel?
It's like
It's all one.
curves.
I know. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's taken from my iPhone. Okay.
Oh, iPhone.
And the book is like this.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
All right.
I have to press it down on
But you actually,
From an
we're
iPhone.
actually going to be right.
An iPhone. It's taken from an iPhone. Telephone.
From the iPhone?
Yeah. I didn't realize you could do that.
I had this.
That takes some time.
Okay, actually, you
I try
have
to
it,
do it
right.
on
I had the original.
Right.
a
Good.
platen, and it's
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is just simply just as it is. Okay. Okay. Anyways.
We're with you.
Here we go. So the Gemara says as follows: Umir Rabbi Yochanan hachi. This is a question of Rabbi Yochanan. According to Rabbi Yochanan, did I skip a line?
Chagiga b'sheni, I said.
Okay, good. So 4.5 lines from the bottom.
Yeah, I just
Fifth
skipped half a line.
Umir Rabbi Yochanan hachi. Does Rabbi Yochanan say that if you couldn't bring it the first day because you are lame, you can't bring it on the other days?
You're a goner.
Right, you're a goner. The Miyam Rabbi Yochanan hachi v'amachiskia nitva bayom maybe balayla. Which one did I bring? Yeah. Right. Nitva bayom maybe balayla. Nitva bayom maybe. Excuse me. Balayla eno maybe. Okay, so the case is as follows. The scenario, if you look in footnote number 32, okay, you have a Nazir. You can read it. It's on the left side.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is one that was under
Right.
10,000.
So you have a Nazir, which we know what a Nazir is. He can't eat, or he can't eat grapes and can't drink produce of grapes. That's what a Nazir. Nazir is normally prohibited for 30 days unless he decides to make it longer.
Right.
We know that. Okay. Now here's what we don't know: should he become tummy from a corpse during this term? The Nazir fulfills all the days of his Naziris that he already observed. He has to undergo the 7-day process of purification, corpse tuma, and on the 8th day he brings a special set of korbanos. And then he begins the terminus. So it becomes tameh. He stops. He loses all of it. He's got to count 7 days, and then he brings a carbon, and then he starts all over again.
Right.
Okay. Now, if a Nazir contracted corpse tumah during this term before the 7-day purification process, right, and then
Sorry.
during his term, began the 7-day purification process, then became tameh a second time before the process ended, he has to start the process all over again. So he's tameh.
Right.
He's counting 7 days to bring his carbon, to start all over. This poor guy, he's got 30 days. He lost the days that he was counting as Nazir. He's not going to count 7. While he's tameh, while he's counting the 7, he becomes tameh a second time, he's got to start all over again.
Start the 7 days.
Start the 7 days all over again, and then after he finishes the 7 days, he's got to do the 30 days all over again. Okay. However, since he was effectively subject to a single uninterrupted state date of Tumah, he brings only one set of offerings at the end of the second purification process. So he's got 7 days which became interrupted. He starts them all over again. But we don't say that he has to bring 2 korbanos. We don't say he was counting 7 to bring korbanos. Now got count another 7. The korban that he brings goes for both sets of 7 days. Okay. If he became tameh on the 8th day during the daytime,
so that's the 7 days are purified now, but he suddenly became tameh on the 8th day. Is that it?
No. He's done 7. He did 7 days, became tameh again, starts to count 7 days. The 7 days are finished.
And now 7 days or is that
the second 7 days? Okay, and he's now on the 8th day, and he has not brought the carbon yet. So the 7 days are over. He's got to count 7 days, and on the 8th day he brings the carbon. He finished his 7 days.
Right.
But he's now past the 7 days of Tumah, right? So he becomes tameh on the 8th day during the daytime. He brings 2 sets of offerings when he's finally purified, since he was already obligated to bring the offerings for the first Tumah before the Tumah began. So he got 7 days. He's now on the 8th day, but before he gets a chance to bring his carbon, he becomes tameh again. Now he's got to count another set of 7 days, but he's got to bring 2 korbanos. Okay, see how complicated this is.
Right.
If in the 5th day of counting his tumah, right, he became tameh, and he's got to count another 7 days. He only brings 1 carbon at the end, because he never finished that 7 day. So it became like one 12-day period.
Right.
If he finished 7 days and he's now on the 8th day, but he hasn't brought the carbon to the Beis Hamikdash yet, he becomes tameh. He finished 1 7 day. He's now got to count another 7 days. But the reality was he's got 2 separate 7-day periods. The Shlamazel didn't bring his carbon yet.
Right.
Now the night between, from the 7th day to the 8th day, that's the machloket.
Right.
At night, he's finished the 7th day, But it's not time to bring the carbon because the carbon can't be brought till tomorrow. So it's like a twilight period. It's halachically the 8th day, right? It's the next day. But it's not halachically that you could bring the carbon. So do you consider this still considered the extension of the 7-day Tameh period? Or do you say the period is over? Even though you're not able and available to bring the carbon, it's still considered a new period of time. That's what's going on here. This makes sense?
Yeah.
That's machloket. So read again. So when it says maybe, it means bringing 2 karbanos. When it says eno maybe, it means we're only bringing 1 carbon. So Ramah Chizkiah, 4 lines at the bottom. Nitba bayom, if he became tamei on the 8th day. So maybe he brings 2 karbanos. Because he had 7 days, the Shlomazal didn't get a chance to bring his 8th day carbon. Too bad. You hold off until you bring in the second period is over. Balayla eno maybe. But if he came tamei on the night, between the 7th and 8th day, he only brings 1 carbon, not the second. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Ach balayla nami maybe. Rabbi Yochanan says, even at night, if he became tamei between the 7th and the 8th day, so he still brings the second carbon. Now, what's the analogy here? What's the question that's being brought? So the question that's being brought is as follows. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, even though the period of time at night, he's not able to really bring the carbon because the carbon is not the time of karbanos. So nonetheless, Rabbi Yochanan considers this as if he had finished his 7 days, now on the 8th day. Even though practically speaking, his obligation to bring the carbon doesn't yet take effect. If you look on the next page in footnote 35, okay? Look at footnote 35. Okay. Once the Nazir has completed its purification process at the end of the 7th day, this is Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation of Rabbi Yochanan, the time for sacrificial obligation has technically begun. Although the obligation does not actually take effect then, because the sacrifice can't be offered at night, Rabbi Yochanan nevertheless requires the Nazir to compensate for the missed opportunity by bringing a sacrifice at the next available time. This means when he completes the second purification process, he brings 2 sets of offerings, one for the first tumah and one for the second tumah. Thus we see, here's the question, that according to Rabbi Yochanan, even someone who is not eligible for a sacrificial obligation during its primary time can still be subject to the law of compensation. So in other words, the scenario is, according to Rabbi Yochanan, if he becomes tamei on the night between the 7th and 8th day, even though he's not eligible to bring a carbon then, because that's not the time to bring carbonos. Carbonos are the next day, but he's still considered as if he should have brought it, and he has to make up for the time that he didn't bring it. So the question is really being based upon, it's a very complicated question, that you see this Nazir, when he became tamei on the night between 7 and 8, he's not able to bring a carbon,
right,
but he still's got to make it up.
Right.
So you see that to make something up, you don't have to only be obligated at that time. Because when did he become obligated to bring
that night?
That night. That's
right.
Not a time to bring a carbon. But it was a time to bring a carbon, but he can't bring a carbon.
But he's still liable. So the analogy back it into the lame person is on the first day. Right.
It's not exactly an analogy.
It's the opposite of what Rabbi Yochanan said at the beginning.
Correct. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the lame person couldn't bring the first day, can't make it up.
Right.
In this case here, the Nazir can't bring that night because he can't bring the carbon that night.
But he still has
to make it up. So when he finishes the second set of tumah, he's got to bring 2 karbanos. That's the smack question against Rabbi Yochanan.
Rabbi Yochanan, exactly.
Okay, that's the question. Now you understand how complicated this is.
Right.
So that's the question on Rabbi Yochanan. Could Rabbi Yochanan really have said the lame person can't make up his carbon? You see, from the case of Nazir, Rabbi Yochanan seems to say the opposite. Okay, so far so good?
Absolutely.
Okay, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Shiny Tuma, the Yesh Lo Tashlumin, the Pesach Sheni. So says Rabbi Yirmiyah, when you can't really make an analogy between carbon Nazir, Tuma, and between the case of the lame person who couldn't bring it for practical reasons. We see Tuma has a certain template where you can make up Tuma, you can make up a carbon for being tamei and being unable. That's the case of Pesach Sheni. The case of Pesach Sheni was the person was Tameh. He couldn't bring the Karban. He gets a makeup time for Pesach Sheni.
Right.
So what do you see? So the Nazir who became Tameh between the 7th and 8th day, even though he couldn't bring the Karban because it's night, he gets a chance to make it up. He makes it up after the second Tumah.
Like Pesach Sheni.
Like Pesach Sheni. But that's not
Tumah,
right. But it's not the same analogy to a person who's lame who couldn't bring his Chagiga because he was lame. So Tumah has a certain concept that it's a makeup, even if in the initial time you couldn't do it. In fact, that's exactly what Pesach Sheni is all about.
Right.
So if it works for Pesach Sheni, it could work for Nazir too. So Amrav Yirmiyah Shani Tumah Diesh Lo Tashlum in Pesach Sheni. Okay, so far so good?
Yeah.
Now, the Gemara says, but that premise on Pesach Sheni is not so clear. Maskif lo Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says, Hani Chalaman di Amar Pesach Sheni Tashlumin the Rishonu. There's a machlokas whether Pesach Sheni is considered a makeup for the first Pesach, or it's a separate yontif, or it's a separate obligation. So if you say the Pesach Sheni is meant as a makeup, okay, that makes sense. So you've answered Rabbi Yochanan why the case of Nazir is different than the case of the lame person. Elaman di Amar Sheni Regel B'fnei Atmahu Ma'ikal Ameimar. Okay, well, what about? But the other opinion says that Pesach Sheni is considered a separate yontif. It's a yontif that you have an obligation, an opportunity to do if you couldn't do the first one. It's like saying that you have a choice between A or B. Not that B is a makeup for A, right? You could take the bus or you could walk, right? You could do one or the other. They're both equal and both have advantages and disadvantages. Right? And maybe the only certain times you could walk. You can't walk in the snow, and you couldn't take the bus when the bus doesn't run. But I'm saying, the other opinion in the Gemara says that Pesach Sheni is considered regel b'fnei atzmo.
But is he arguing? He's not arguing necessarily though that Rabbi Yirmiyah.
Yes, so he said there's two opinions about Pesach Sheni.
I see.
So we don't know what Rabbi Yochanan would say.
That's what I'm saying.
But if Rabbi Yochanan would say that Pesach Sheni is tashlumin, so now everything works out. But if you say that Pesach Sheni is not tashlumin, you have no proof that there's ever tashlumin for karbanos for Tumah.
Yeah.
Right, when you couldn't bring on the first time around, because it's not the first time around. It's really the Pesach Sheni is the first time around. Michael Ameimar, Ella Amar Rav Papa, Kasav Rav Yochanan Laila Eina Mechusar Zman. So Rav Yochanan holds the fact that, going back to the analogy of the Nazir, what do we say? He did 7 days,
right,
and between the 7th and the 8th day, he became Tameh. And we said, well, you know what, he wasn't obligated then because he couldn't bring a karban.
He was, but he couldn't.
Right, so the answer is maybe Rabbi Yochanan doesn't say that. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan really holds that even at night,
you could do it.
It's not you can't bring a karban, it's the day of bringing the karban. So even though that night hours, when before the sun comes up, you can't bring the karban, right, that's just a technical reason why you can't bring the sacrifice. It's considered, though, that's the day that you're obligated. If you look in footnote, this is 9b1, footnote 3. Okay. Footnote 9b3. If a person is required to bring a sacrifice on a particular day, the obligation takes effect at the beginning of the night before. Although he cannot bring the sacrifice at night, this is only a technical factor which prevents the sacrificial obligation being realized in practice. Does not delay the onset of the obligation. Therefore, in our case, the Nazir who must bring Tumah offerings on his 8th day, he actually becomes obligated the night before. Mm-hmm. He was thus subject to the obligation to bring the first Tumah offerings before he contracted the second Tumah. In other words, he was obligated to bring the karban. He couldn't bring it that moment. So the fact that he couldn't bring it that moment at night is simply a technical exclusion. He's finished his days of Tumah. So therefore, although his obligation can be fulfilled immediately, it must nevertheless be fulfilled the next opportunity. This cannot be compared to the case of the lame person on the first day of festival who's not obligated to bring the Chagiga at all. Hence, after he recovers, he's not obligated to bring the offering. Yeah. So Rav Papa says the reason why Rav Yochanan can argue differently about the Nazir than he does about the lame person, because the lame person was not obligated. The Nazir between the 7th and 8th day is obligated. He just practically can't bring the karban. Okay? Now, so far so good. One more hurdle. Okay? So the Gemara says, Umi Rav Yochanan Hachi. Now the Gemara says, did Rav Yochanan really say this, that the obligations for sacrifice begin at night?
Right.
Because that's the
Nazir's
right. Because the answer of Rav Papa is you differentiate between Nazir and Lane because you say the sacrifice obligations is at night.
Right.
Does Rabbi Yochanan really agree to this? And I'll show you a question why he does not. Rabbi Yochanan, here comes the Zav. Okay. Here's about the Zav. Rabbi Yochanan, look in footnote 4 to explain what a Zav is, because it's a little complicated. Footnote 4 right after footnote 3. A Zav is a man, I told you it was complicated. A Zav is a man who experiences an emission similar but not identical to a seminal discharge. Okay? After one emission, he assumes tumah in the same degree as a Balkari. As one who has experienced a regular similar emission, right? Like a Balkari, he immerses himself in the mikveh and becomes tahar at nightfall. So a zav, a one-time zav, is tahar the night he goes to the mikveh one day. Okay, he's out. If he experiences a second emission on the same or following day, either that day or day later, he gets a higher degree of tumah. It's called tumas ziva. What's he do? He counts 7 clean days with no emissions, immerses himself on the 7th day and becomes tahar at nightfall. Okay.
I never heard of this, but yeah.
It's Zav.
I mean, I heard of a Zav, but I never heard of this double thing.
He can immerse himself.
The second one.
Think he's clean.
And
have an emission later.
Yeah.
Correct. That's right.
He could think he's clean, bring a korban or whatever.
He doesn't make a korban. One time does not bring a korban, just goes to the mikvah.
Right. No, he brings a korban. So I mean, like
right.
He can do whatever he can do because he thinks he's clean.
Correct.
But then he realizes it's not clean.
You're right. It's ruined. Correct.
Right.
That's right. It'd be the next day. Precisely.
So,
but if he has one time or one-time zav, goes to the mikvah.
Right. So then it's clean.
It's clean. But the next, if he sees ziva again the next day,
it's too late the next day.
It's still the next day.
Right, but before late
or the same night.
No, but he could bring this. What did we talk about before? We
didn't talk about ziva. We didn't talk about ziva before anything.
Okay, but so what me was a tumas ziva implies twice, but the first time
it's like a balkari.
As a zav.
Tomei is a zav like a balkari. A balkari is a very low level of tumah.
Gotcha.
Okay. So people didn't learn the day they were balkari. They went to the mikveh and so forth. It's one day. So whatever remained of the day. These are laws we don't really carry out today because we don't do tumatara. Right. The only laws of tumatara we do is Kohen doesn't go to cemetery and halachas of nida. All these laws are very strange for us. Judaism looked very different. Okay, because of the tumah laws. So a second emission on the same or following day, he assumes a higher degree of tumah ziva. He counts 7 clean days, right? Immerses himself on the 7th day and becomes tahar at nightfall. That's twice. So he's got 7 days. A zav who experiences 3 emissions within a 3-day period must bring a special korban after becoming tahar through the aforementioned process. Right? The statement that follows in the Gemara refers to a zav who had 3 emissions within a 3-day period, counted 7 clean days, and immersed himself in a mikvah on the 7th day as required. However, before bringing a sacrifice on the 8th day, he began to experience another series of emissions. Okay, so it's a similar kind of thing like the Nazir, only for us the Ziva thing is so strange, it's so far away from our imaginations, right? We don't even understand what Ziva is. Okay, we don't understand what this means. Like it's a urinary tract infection, we would say.
As I say, you got to go to a urologist.
They translated, which is not correct, as gonorrhea or something. Yeah, which is not correct.
Right, it was some kind of emission, correct? Right? We don't. I say for us, we look at these things in medical terms. Right. We don't look at these things in tumah terms. So whatever they were, there was some kind of tumah.
Okay, so here he's like in a position where he's done everything he's supposed to. He's supposed to bring the korban, but before he can bring it, that's it, right on the 8th day.
Right, correct. So if before he's supposed to bring it, so he's had three emissions.
Right.
Supposed to bring a korban. He counted 7 clean days. He went to the mikveh. Before he brought his korban on the 8th day, he saw another series of ziva. Okay?
Yeah.
So here's the case. Okay, go back to the Gemara. I'm going to run a little past 9:30. Is that okay? Because I don't want to go back there. If you saw one emission at night, the night between the 78 days, and 2 emissions on the following day, so this is now, maybe you bring offerings for the second Tumah Ziva in addition to the offering for the first Tumah Ziva. So what's the case again? You were purified from the second state of Tumah Ziva, you brought 2 sets of offerings. Since you're already eligible to bring the offerings for the first Tumah before entering the second Tumah, there are 2 separate periods of Tumah, each requiring its own set of sacrifices. So what did you have here? Since he was eligible for the first Tumah and the second Tumah, 2 sets, right? Although the first emission of the second series took place at night, the two states of Tumah do not overlap because the second Mishnah legally renders Mazav and then a Mishnah not have until the daytime. So you saw one emission at night between the 7th and 8th days.
So this is after he's gone through 7 days.
He's done 7 days. Right now he sees one emission at night and two on the next day. So the first 7 days are finished.
Right.
It's like the Nazir kind of thing.
Like a Nazir.
Right. He has 7 days. He's waiting for his first ziva. Finished it. That night he sees one. The next day, the 8th day, he sees two more.
Before he's had a chance to bring a korban.
Right. So he brings.
We hasn't rested before he's had a chance to bring a korban that night.
So that night before he's done 7. On the 8th day he's supposed to bring a korban, but that night between 7 and 8 he sees another ziva, right? And then on the 8th day he sees two more.
Right.
Okay. So in such a case, he brings korbanos for the second Tumah ziva. Brings 2 sets of korbanos. He brings 2 sets of korbanos. Because he was eligible to bring the karbanos for the first tumah before entering the second tumah. There are 2 sets, there are 2 periods of tumah. Okay, the first emission of the second series took place at night, but the 2 states of tumah don't overlap because the second emission, it's a second emission that legally renders a mazav. I get. Okay, so in other words, even if the night becomes, okay, so I get it. So even if the night itself is maybe still the not considered because he can't bring a korban, but you still got 2 the next day. So 2 the next day would require him to bring a korban. He's got 7 days, 1 at night. Let's say the night itself is not considered technically a new time because he can't bring the korban, but the next day he has two tumas, which would require him to become that tumah ziva, which requires 7 days once again. Okay. So on the other hand, shtayim bayom. Okay, shtayim bayom bi'achas balayla. But if he saw 2 emissions at night, and what? 2 emissions. If ba'achas balayla v'shtayim bayom maybe.
Okay.
Sees 1 at night and 2 the next day brings a second korban.
Right.
If you say shtayim balayla b'yachas bayom, but if he saw 2 that night, 2 at night between 7 and 8, and 1 the next day and the 8th day, eno maybe he doesn't bring a second set of korbanos because we're now assuming that the night is not considered the time to bring the korban and therefore still becomes subsumed to the previous period of time. Remember, here's the question. The premise that we're working with Rav Papa is that Rabbi Yochanan must say that at night it's not considered mechusar zman. Night is already considered you're obligated to bring the korban.
Right.
That's the answer we tried to answer for Nazir versus Lane.
Right.
The Gemara says now, but look at this case here of Ziva. In the first, there are 2 scenarios according to Rabbi Yochanan. One scenario is he finishes 7 days. And that night, when he can't bring the korban, he saw one zav,
right,
and the next day he saw 2.
Right.
So at night, we'll say at night is considered it's still considered part of the first 7 days because you can't bring the korban. The next day, he saw 2. That makes him a zav.
Right.
But if it's reversed, 7 days, 2 at night, and then 1 in the day. So then he doesn't bring a second korban. The assumption looks like that the night is considered as part of the first group because the night is mechusar zman. So it looks like it goes opposite to what the first answer we just said before about Rabbi Yochanan's. We tried to say Rabbi Yochanan's previous answer. Right. We tried to say that Rabbi Yochanan at night is considered part of the next day.
Right.
But this looked like the night is part of the previous day because you can't bring a korban. And therefore, if you have a 7-day period of zav plus the 1 at night, okay, that's still part of the first group. 2 day, 2 on the next day makes you it's a double zav, makes you a zav, a second period of time. Right. But the other way around, if it's 7 days, 2 at night, the next day you're only like a balkari.
Right.
So that's what Rabbi Yochanan says. So shtayim balayla ve'achas b'yom eno mevi v'yisol kadaitach kasav Rabbi Yochanan laila ena mechusar zman. And if you say, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that night is not considered something's missing, in other words, it's like the next day, except technically you can't bring the carbon. I'll feel shtayim balayla v'yachas bayom maybe. So then, based on everything we said, even so 2 hours at night and 1 the next day, that should already make it for the next period of time. That's the question. So what we just said, like 4 lines above, according to Rav Papa, that Rabbi Yochanan says Laila eina mechus zman. This looks like he says Laila is mechus zman. So the Gemara says, Ki kam Rabbi Yochanan ledivrei omer Laila mechus zman. What Rabbi Yochanan is saying here, he's not saying his opinion. He's saying according to the other opinion that says Laila is mechus zman. I'm going to tell you what the halacha is. So the Gemara gives a very difficult answer. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan is trying to say that I hold Laila in a mechus zman.
Right.
But the other people, even if you say that Laila is mechus zman, right? According to the opinion that says Laila is not the time to bring the carbon, and therefore it's not considered part of the next day. This is what the halacha would be. Okay. So the Gemara says, that's the Gemara says. Now we have a few lines. Let's see if we can make it to the end of this. Okay. So the Gemara says, Ladivrei Omer. Pshita. The Gemara says, wait, according to the other opinion that we're saying, Rabbi Yochanan is saying that Laila is Mechus Zman, it should be obvious that another sacrifice is not brought. Right? Because if you say that Laila is Mechus Zman, then the 2 things at night don't count. So what's the Chiddush of Rabbi Yochanan saying it? So the Gemara answers, and it's a difficult answer, Shtayim bayom v'achas balayla istrichalei. He needs to tell this to me for the case of where there was 1 at night. Don't read Shtayim bayom v'achas balayla. Read achas balayla u'shtayim bayom. 1 at night and 2 the next day. That's the chiddush of Rabbi Yochanan. Achas balayla u'shtayim bayom, that he brings the carbon. So kedai dechamina biat kafta de Rav Shisha brei de Rav Idi. I would have thought to say that the ruling is incorrect in light of the question Rav Shisha brei de Rav Idi raised against this opinion, which we didn't explain yet. Kamash Malan bin Rav Yosef. So he says, no, we don't follow Rav Shisha brei de Rav. We follow Rav Yosef. Okay. And now what's Rav Shisha braid Rav Yosef? Rav Shisha braid the Rav Idi. Okay. All right, this is I think the last page you have of footnote number 11. Okay. See what makes sense. This Rabbi Yochanan ruled in this case 1 emission at night and 2 the next day, that the Zav brings 2 sets of offerings. This ruling, however, requires explanation, for since the emission begins at night, the second Tumah began before he became obligated to bring the sacrifice of the first Tumah. According to the premise of this teaching, a sacrificial offering obligation does not take effect till the morning the sacrifice is due. Yeah. Therefore, the Zav should be viewed as having been subject to 1 continuous Tumah, which warrants only 1 set of offerings. The Gemara increases, quoting Rav Yosef, who explains Rav Yochanan's ruling by noting that any Zav who experiences just 1 emission has the status of a mere Balkari. Okay? It's not exactly the same. Nevertheless, when he has a second emission, the first emission combines with the second to render him a full-fledged Zav. Thus, in Rav Yochanan's case, where the second and third emissions occurred during the daytime, the first emission can also combine with them, and it is not until the daytime the Tumah Zuva actually begins. It emerges then that the second Tumah Ziva began after he became obligated to offer the first set of sacrifices, in which case he is viewed as having subject to 2 separate states of Ziva. So I'm not sure I fully understand it. The Gemara increases then fully quotes Rav Shisha, son of Rav Idi, who disputes Rav Yosef's explanation. Rav Shisha argues it's only in the case of a regular Zav that the first emission combines with the second emission. This cannot be compared to Rav Yochanan's case, where the first emission occurred during a period of liability for a prior Tumah, which possibly renders him capable. So the Chiddush is whether the first Zav at night is going to be considered connected to the 2 of the next day, right, and make him a triple Zav or not. So the Chiddush is not, the Chiddush is according to the person who says Laila Mechus Zman, in the case of the 1 at night and 2 the next day, that it's considered a triple type of Zav. That's how I best understand it. So at the end of the day, we've really separated Rabbi Yochanan's opinion from the lame person to either the Nazir right? Or we've separated the lame person from the case of Ziva in terms of what you consider in terms of Laila. Really, Rabbi Yochanan would say that Laila is still considered the new time period, right? Either we say that the Tuma, you have a makeup period for Korbanos, or we say that Laila is not considered a time, it's considered the next day, but that's not the same for lame, who's about practical. The bottom line is to bring us to closure here, that the Rabbi Yochanan in our Gemara is talking about a lame person who, practically speaking, is not obligated.
Legally not obligated.
Legally not obligated, right.
He's not
All
obligated.
the other cases have to deal with Tuma or Ziva or Nazir, and are especially unique cases that are different from Yochanan. That's about as good as I can make it.
But that's good, because it's clear that what really makes it complicated, like you said, is, if you have one emission, so you're like Azah, you're a carry, really, and that puts you in a different position. Then if it follows up the next morning with two others, then you're in a whole different
changes everything, correct.
Exactly.